Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Richard, this is Lap of the World, and these are just the laps at G2 Motorsports Park. This video is mainly intended to show you some reference laps for help learning this circuit before you might go and drive it yourself. Although there is some overtaking, keep in mind that this was an HPDE group and any passing was done via an acknowledged point buy. This was the track portion of NSXPO 2024 hosted by the NSX Club of America. If you want to find out more about how to get on track at G2 yourself, check out our how-to video on the topic. If you want to find out more about the NSX Club, check out nsxca.org. For this installment of Just the Laps, we're going to start by playing with some new toys in the interest of learning more about my car and potentially improving my driving, or at least calling it out. And then we'll talk through our quickest session of the weekend at length. Kicking things off, though, with some data-driven analysis of what we're doing, we somewhat recently had Science of Speed install an AEM Racedash in the car, along with a handful of supplemental sensors. We've done something of a dive on that here if you want to learn more, but the upshot is that we can now better understand what the car is doing, and I can also review my own driving inputs in much greater detail than before. A reminder as we pit out, we're driving the full combined layout at G2 Motorsports Park, which is 3.1 miles and 22 turns. That makes it actually the second longest track in Texas, right behind COTA. It has about 50 feet of elevation delta, which we'll point out as we go along. But we're going to start our insights here with talking about some of the car portion of the data logging, as you'll note the coolant and oil temperatures as we get started. Now, I had driven a session about an hour before this, so stuff had not cooled down all the way back down to ambient. Ambient, in this case, being about 90 degrees F. So it was a hot day in Texas and fairly dry. So you'll see we kind of find the limits of our NA1, stockish NA1 NSX's cooling system here, and you can kind of see that progress as we go along. For you NSX owners in particular, I'd like you to note the difference between the numeric coolant temperature display that's on the graphic in the lower right, and these are all in degrees F. Compare that to the leftmost dial on the factory cluster in the dashboard, which is the coolant temperature sensor for those unfamiliar. And you'll note that the factory gauge, it never really moves from its kind of just below the center normal point, whereas the actual coolant temperature in degrees does change significantly between the between pit out and when we pit in. Now we're doing basically here an out lap, a flyer, and an in lap in 90 degrees, and we're driving it. None of this is 10/10. I've got a passenger with me, although he wasn't exactly a civilian as he was participating in his own car, or at least was up to a point. So we're leaning on the car a little bit here, but well within margin of error. So with that table set, the other thing I want to point out is the brake indicator that you just saw flick on and off right there. As you're watching the display, note the brake indicator the way we have it set up right now is an on-off switch. So that is not an actual indicator of brake pressure. That is just showing you when I've gone on the pedal and when I've come off the pedal. So that is, while it doesn't, so it's not giving you how I'm progressively braking or trail braking or not, or how lightly or not I'm braking. It will at least tell you when I've gone on the brakes and when I've completely blended off the brakes. So just that note as you're watching, if you're critiquing my driving, I am not just stabbing the brake pedal and then coming all the way off of it, just before the apex or whatever. The throttle input, that should be completely accurate, as should the RPM and speed. Those are all sampled at numerous times a second, so should be fairly accurate. So we're coming around here for our flyer now, and again, you can look at the car temperature data, what you want there, but we're going to talk about a little bit, do some driving analysis now, using those brake and throttle indicators. Because this is a good test, I think. Why this data is useful is it kind of overcomes the feel versus real paradox, I guess. Maybe an appropriate word to call it. Because it's that sensation of like, okay, in my head, coming up here to 5A, in my head, I want to brake, and then I want to blend off the brakes as I'm turning in to rotate the car. So you can see I still had steering lock in when the brake light went off before I then went to it again. So that tells me that I was probably doing a version of what I was intending to do. So the brakes were on, the pedal was depressed some, after initial turn-in. So there, wheel turns, brakes are now completely off. So it wasn't the, the traditional HPDE school, HPDE 1 track driving training is you want to, get all your braking done in a straight line, get off the brakes, turn, and then get on the gas. So you're separating those things, and then you kind of advance from that into whatever, I don't know, the thing I've heard it called, I think, is the traction circle, or the strings between the wheel and the pedals. So you can do some turning while you brake, but you don't want to do, you can only do so much. And similarly, while you're turning, you can only put in so much gas because it's traction limited. Getting into that section of the, that part of driving theory. And then somewhere after that, you stop sort of worrying about that and start worrying more about, not you stop worrying about it, but you start to focus more on weight transfer, and how your inputs are affecting weight transfer, and therefore where you have traction. So as you put the brakes on and the weight shifts forward, then you have more traction at the front up to a point. But you have to kind of like figure out how much brakes gives you extra steering versus how much brakes just creates understeer or locks your fronts if you don't have ABS. So that's kind of the fun part there. And you can see there's like sections there where I kind of like, I want to be full throttle, I want to be blended throttle. You see I had some throttle there. And then here I want to be all the way on the throttle, and I get on that pretty quickly. Although I'm blending it in, so I'm not just stomping on it. As we come around to the end of our flyer, and noting that our oil temperature is now at over 250 degrees, we're now going to back it off, as I'm going to indicate to my passenger here in a moment. That we're gonna go into chill mode for a little bit here, to cool things down, make sure everything gets cooled all the way back down before we go back in the pits, and then just switch the car off, to make sure we're not heat soaking anything as it sits there. So yeah, on that note, and again, this is kind of this is going to vary by car probably a little bit, but with the the 10W30 that I'm running in here, 10W30 synthetic in the NSX, I think Science of Speed had the alert set for 250 degrees as the warning point on the dash display. The unfortunately tragically late and but always inimitable John Vassos was in the paddock for this event, and I was able to sort of talk to him for a little bit and just be like, yeah, they've run a bunch of NSX race cars all over the place, and he's like, yeah, 260 is probably about the most that, and then it's getting pretty sketchy after that. So I was being pretty careful the rest of the time to make sure that I was anytime I'd run it up to the to 250, because it didn't take that long to do, but then I would make sure it got cool. It would cool back off some, so I would at least take it easy for a lap to make sure I was maintaining some kind of reasonably safe oil temperature for the duration of the event. And that's something that I couldn't do prior to having that kind of data on the car. And who knows, maybe in even hotter conditions in Arizona in 2022, it could have saved me a motor. Changing scenes here, you'll have seen this view and section of 360 video in our track feature, but while editing, I had the thought that this could actually be a pretty useful coaching tool, since from this perspective, it removes any speculation about where your car was positioned on the track relative to an apex or a turn-in point or anything like that. If you're watching an in-car camera, it's always a little bit speculative because you've got the fenders in the way. So it's a question, I pitched the car into a turn and I want to apex at a certain point. Did I actually apex where I meant to? It's a little bit hard to tell in the moment, but since you will have heard me talk over this, I'm just going to shut up and let you watch it this time, and we'll pick you back up afterwards for the session in which we turn in this lap. And across the line for a 2-minute 31-second lap. Now, as you'll see, I felt like I could have probably gone quicker than that later on in this session, and which we'll watch. We'll transition into watching most of. I'm going to skip around a little bit so you don't have to watch the entirety of the warm-up lap here. But while we are getting things up to temperature, I guess it is worth noting that this was the morning of the second day, and things like this I kind of hesitate to say out loud, but I think it's probably fair game. I try to be a pretty good steward of the open track day HPDE hobby, but I'm kind of cursed with having run time trials, so I know when I want to turn have the best chance of turning a pretty competent lap, it's best to target the ideal conditions, and that was this. So this being the morning of the second day, the track's been swept, it's not dusty anymore. I've had a whole day of practice to kind of figure things out and figure out how I want to attack it. And then it is also about 60 degrees this time of morning at this event versus the 90 degrees midday that we saw in the first segment of this video. So we're just kind of driving it around here. One challenge, obviously, in the morning, you do have a little bit of sun glare that you can see on the windshield there. And that was something that we had to overcome. But we'll get the car warmed up here, and then we'll have a few flyers. So let's skip ahead to that part. So starting the first of a couple of flyers, this first lap is, again, here we're giving you a series of consecutive laps to help kind of learn the track. But this first flyer is kind of a reminder that we're in just kind of an open track HPD situation where we're relying on point buys to do things efficiently. And given it's the first session of the day, people are kind of taking their own time to warm up. So we're, that's the BMW we just sort of had to barely hesitate to get around there was a local fellow that was moving very quickly. Like he ate my lunch in most other sessions, but him on his outlap versus me being fully up to speed, again, playing nicely with others basically. So we're really trying to then get on with this and take advantage of the tires while we have them under us. Being with cooler conditions, the first thing to give up on, the way my NSX is set up anyway, the first thing to give up is kind of the front grip. Some of that's probably driver, if we're honest, loosen up behind the wheel or whatever you want to call it. The car is usually fairly neutral, but as the tires get hot, the front tires are definitely the first ones to start giving up grip. And that's probably just mainly due to the stagger. It's a 215 front, 255 rear, and we're currently running a Falcon Zenith 615K Plus. I'd run the 660s for a while, and they were a lot more grippy. I like the road manners on the 615s a little better, and they're usually cheaper. So that is what it is. And here again, we're reminded that we're in a DE group, and folks warm up at their own group. I know that this driver that's in front of us, a little delayed on the point by, but that's because he was just promoted really from a coached group, so he's now having to watch his own mirrors, and does a decent job of it. Again, we're all playing nice here. He gives me the peace sign as a point by, acknowledging it took him a second. I gave him a wave. We talked later. But it's not a big deal. Again, nobody's out here to win anything, and it's kind of good to be reminded of that periodically, because I think I've seen people get the ubiquitous red mist at times. All my hand gestures there are mainly just to kind of communicate, and if he was it looked like he was trying to give me room on the inside of a turn, but I didn't want to take the point then, so waited until the following straight. But now we are on to what ended up being our fastest lap here. And we do pretty good on this lap. There are a few places that I will point out things that I've messed up, but we're generally pretty tidy, and that was the goal. I figured just with the conditions, and if I could keep the front end under the car, then the extra power that I was going to gain from the cooler air in the morning and having the extra push laps available was probably going to net me a decent lap time, and it did. So the first thing that I could have done better, and I'll make the adjustment on the lap after, or 2 laps later. Here I was a little early on 5B, and it pushed me out to the edge of the track there, which gave me an awkward line into 6, and I had to lift more than I would have wanted to there. Normally you're like, yeah, sure, use the whole track, but in that case you don't have a whole lot of room. So you add a lot of distance if you track all the way out of 5B versus kind of going extra late on the apex on 5B and then coming out of there. And then here, obviously, like, great awareness on that fellow's part. He knows who he is. Early point by, I didn't have to lift for that. I just had to go a little bit offline and tighten my entry to 9. I guess that's 9 west. You know, here, this is our peak speeds on this track. We were hitting about 115, 116. I feel like I should be going the fastest at the end of this straight, because you carry so much speed through that earlier turn. But I don't know. I was probably chickening out a little bit through this because this turn puts you over a crest. And I heard tell that you could probably send it pretty hard through there and just use the compression to brake in a straight line after the car as the car starts to bottom out. But it's kind of hard to trust that when when you're kind of a little bit blind over a crest and all you can see out there is grass and I'm not sure. I wasn't super enthused on risking an agricultural excursion for the sake of bragging rights. But coming here through the carousel, and again, here again, this is kind of like a car placement thing. I don't know if I should be a little bit more to the left there, but the rubber on the track suggests I was in the right place, and that seems about right compared to some videos that I was watching. So that ended up being our quickest lap. You can see the large view of the in-dash timer there, because I failed at data, which is why I don't have the fancy all the fancy driver inputs and stuff that I did for the first session I showed in this video. And that's purely me. I pulled the logs from the data logger, and then, like a dummy, I pulled all the ones that had lap times. But for whatever reason, the way the AEM thing works, I don't know. There's a little bit of a learning curve to it, and I clearly had not climbed the learning curve far enough. So I pulled what I thought was all the logs, which didn't end up being all the logs. It kind of conveniently excluded my fastest lap. And then I had, from this trip, I actually had some takeaways that I wanted to update, reflash. It was just simple stuff like the night mode on the Racedash for when I'm driving on the street at night. It's still a little bit bright, so I turned down the percentage of that and then reflashed it. But when you reflash it, it clears all the logs. I didn't know that, so anyway, that's a lot of extra information you probably didn't care about, but this is what we do. We're off script on these Just the Laps videos. You just get what I'm throwing at you at this point. Yeah. Anyway, so reeling things back in a little bit here, though. Like, G2 is actually a ton of fun as a track. We'll get to our sort of hero, what could have been a hero lap here again in a moment as we pass one of, I think, I can't remember how many of these there are, how many of those things there are. It's like 30. It's almost like a double or single digit number of cars in that particular color. Monaco Blue Pearl. Anyway, NSX nerding notwithstanding. Yeah, G2 was a ton of fun, actually. There's a lot of variety to this track. It seems like it's a fairly like safety-wise, like odds of getting yourself into trouble or doing damage. I don't think you really have much chance of hurting yourself. I mean, racing is dangerous, let's be honest, but as far as tracks go, this one only has 2 stretches of concrete barrier here and on the other side in the whole place. The rest of it's guardrail, and most of that is very well positioned with some runoff where you would stand a chance of departing the track at particularly high speed. There is paved runoff, which is nice. But getting onto this lap here, if you look at the far left of the screen, I'm running a yet another, excuse my corgis in the background, holy crap. But on my phone over there on the screen is a green bar, and that is another lap timer I'm running. And you'll note here at 5B in particular, I get this a lot better. Look, I clip there pretty late. I keep it mid-track, which lets me barely lift through here. I mean, other than shifting, barely lift through here. And I'm carrying a ton more speed, and you can just see the time gained going up there. Get a pretty decent, again, I've gotten 7, I kind of treat 7 and 8 like one turn, and that seemed to work. So I wasn't really tracking out at all until I was out of 8 here. And then coming into 9, again, I'm able to take a normal line this time and get a nicer apex and get on the full power sooner, I should say. Probably not on the power sooner, but up to full power sooner. And you can see we are now, I looking at the actual log on the phone, I was more than a second up. Probably 1.5, 1.8 seconds, maybe, I don't know, approaching 2 seconds up on my time. But naturally, we just crawl past a checkered flag, and then we're obliged to cool the car down, which it probably saving us from ourselves, honestly, because the oil temps are getting up there. We were at 255 or 254, and I'd been cooling it off at 250. But my competitive side getting the better of me, I was thinking, like, I'll finish this lap and then cool it off, because it's ambient cool. It'll cool back down pretty quick. And this track is, from an NSX danger standpoint, it doesn't have a lot of very high G, like the banked turn that we'll go through again up here as we're cooling down. It's the friendly direction for oil pan slosh, so I wasn't too terribly worried about most other places. But that's where we'll leave it as we cool things down and pull into the pits. We hope you enjoyed watching this, the consecutive laps here, or if you decide to go and try and drive this fun and engaging track yourself. Yeah, please feel free as well to leave any comments if you see things that I missed, or if you want to critique my driving. Go ahead, I can take it. But otherwise, thanks again for watching. I'm Richard. This is Lap of the World, and we'll see you all in the next video, if not at the track.